Hey, everybody, welcome to another great episode of Catholic Laughter. I'm one of your hosts, Carl Kozlowski.
And I'm the other host, Scott Vinci.
And tonight we're going to be joined by a really great Catholic comedian legend named Tom Dreesen.
Yeah.
Very excited to have him. But first, we want to talk about Easter.
Easter. How was your Easter, Carl? What'd you do? Did you
Oh, geez, man. Well, while you were getting to enjoy the glamorous high life of Mass in LA, I was stuck back home in Little Rock, Arkansas at my boyhood parish that I went to since I was 8.
Wow. How was that?
Yeah. Well, I dreamed of escaping Arkansas my entire childhood. I make it to LA for 30, almost 25 years, That's where we meet. And then they still pulled me back in. I'm back now for 4 years. I can't escape it. It's like
funny.
Al Pacino in The Godfather, they pulled me back in. But yeah, it was weird. I mean, it's like all the old people who were there when I was a kid are still alive. It's a miracle.
It's a miracle.
Yeah. But I saw my 5th grade teacher, and here I thought Jesus was the one who got resurrected on Easter. I mean, just ridiculous. But
yeah, those people, how old are they now? Like in their 80s or 90s, maybe?
Oh, yeah. No, there's some in their 90s easy, man. They're just totally like, I don't know, I guess living the holy life.
You're the one with ADHD, right? Okay.
Wait, I know you because you've always been the pudgy one. But yeah, they act like I'm still 8. I mean, I held the door open for one of them and they gave me a lollipop.
Yeah, that's old school when you get a candy for holding the door.
Yeah. But, and then it was always the same for me because now that I'm here, I go to Mass with my parents and my mom still adjusts my collar every time in front of everybody. It's ridiculous.
That's funny.
But, and when my brother and we go and we wind up giggling during Mass, she smacks both of us in the back of the head.
Stop it. Stop.
But, one time one of the altar boys was sick and the priest had me fill in for one of them. I was like, do you think that chair is going to hold?
I bet you really filled in that outfit for the altar boy. Yeah. Do they have your size even?
Yeah, well,
can I get this in XL man size, please? Thanks.
Yeah, they have the special order for the next time because I think I tore the back of it when I was putting it on. Yeah. But how about for you, Scott? How was Easter in LA?
Well, I go to church in Beverly Hills. Everybody's like, "Oh, you go to church in Beverly Hills." Hey, I tell people we have the same. We're like every other church. We have a 2 Eucharist minimum, like you do.
Yeah.
After church, our priest signs autographs, like your priest does.
Oh, sure.
It's all the same thing.
Yeah.
We have the same valet parking that you have. So, but actually, what's funny is like we'll have celebrity okay, so when they announce deaths at Mass, they'll say, this person died, that person died. Ours will literally, they do announce celebrities because celebrities, some of them go to church there, or even if they're not Catholic, they'll just announce them. I don't know why. It's like, please pray for John Smith, also Terry Watkins and Suzanne Summers. May she rest in peace. It's really weird. I've noticed that a few times, but it's kind of funny.
Wow. Was there any? Do you actually see anybody?
Sometimes I've seen. I saw David Borealis Angel one year. Remember that?
Oh wow! Perfect Angel? Place for a Catholic church, huh?
Yeah.
The Angel.
Sometimes you get distracted though, because it's like. There will be celebrities at our church, and you're supposed to be thinking about Jesus, and you're actually thinking about Mark Wahlberg sitting right in front of you, his backside. So it's weird.
Well, I went to that church when my aunt took me once when I visited when I was literally about 8 or 9 years old once, and I turned around for the "Peace be with you" sign of peace, and Kato Kalin was behind me. And I wasn't 8. What am I talking about? I once got communion given to me by the Scarecrow from The Wizard of Oz when I was like 8 or 9. And I was like, I kind of recognize that face. And he gave me this big And then he gave me the communion, like, it's me. And then, because my jaw was dropped, and then, but yeah, with Cato, I was like, I don't know, this is early 90s. So I was like maybe 22, 23. And I turn around and like, bam. I mean, weird kind of celebrity, but OJ Simpson's best friend.
Yeah.
So there he was. Yeah. And he just smiled and was like, I'm Cato.
Wow.
So
Hey, back to the Scarecrow. What was the Scarecrow? What did he want in The Wizard of
a
Oz?
brain, a brain.
Brain. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, maybe he displayed a brain that day, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's time for a very special other segment we do every week, huh?
It sure is, Carl. It's time for
Saints Corner.
Yeah, we've got a really good one this week. A lot of fun. On our last episode, we were having some fun with St. Patrick's Day, but this time the Belgians have got us beat. They actually have St. Arnold, the patron saint of beer.
Saint Arnold, the patron saint of beer. Ah! Get down! Look out! Hand me a beer! Ah!
Yeah, well, the thing is that he is he's a saint that everybody can agree on because is great, because you know what his miracle is?
What?
It's
What's the
that
miracle?
whenever people prayed to him to give them what they wanted,
Mm-hmm.
a pot of beer appeared. Yeah.
I'd be praying all the time to St. Arnold. I'd be like, dear St. Arnold, please help me get through this test in economics. And also, can I have a beer stein? Ah!
Or you go to a bar and it's like, every time the bartender's like, you want anything? You're like, I do. And then it appears for free.
How did he do that? He's Catholic.
Yeah. But, so St. Arnold actually was a monk in Belgium in like the 500s to 600s of years, and he basically tried to try to get all the local peasants to drink beer,
Mm-hmm.
because instead of water, even because due to beer's gift of health. So during the process of brewing the water, the water was boiled and freed of all the pathogens. So everything that was in water back in the nasty Middle Ages, before they knew how to filter anything properly, it would come out when they're making the beer. So it was like everybody would, at an outbreak of sickness, he would tell them, "Oh yeah, drink beer," and everybody would get better, save lives.
So basically, it was better to be drunk than dead. That's what they're saying.
Isn't it always though? It's always. Yeah.
Throughout time.
That's kind of my motto for a living. Better drunk than dead.
We should get T-shirts made. St. Arnold, better drunk than
dead. Yeah. But so then there was like one miracle tale said that rather than stand by while the local people fell ill from drinking water, he had them drink the brew. But then that's how people survived the plague. But he's also honored in July with a parade in Brussels on the Day of Beer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So,
It's got to be a good day, Everybody's watching the parade go by, drinking, a few people throwing up.
But, I think that they ought to team up the Belgians St. Arnold's Day with St. Patrick's Day. You pretty much have the greatest holy day of all time.
Yes. Cheers to that.
But I think that it just shows that the Catholic Church is the coolest church, because like half the other denominations out there won't even have a drink, and we've got a patron saint of beer.
We have a saint for drinking. Thank God I'm Catholic. That's all I have to say.
That's right. Well, so folks, I think we'll introduce our special guest today.
Wait a second, Carl. This has been
Saints Corner.
All right, folks. So we want to bring you our special guest today. Very excited to have him. He headlined our very first show that we ever did as Catholic Laughter, and he also has been on toured the world with Frank Sinatra as his opening act for over a decade. He's made over 500 late night TV appearances. Guest hosted the Tonight Show 60 times.
That's a lot.
And was on Letterman for 30 consecutive years, every year that Letterman was ever on. And great Catholic guy. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Tom Dreesen.
So let me ask you this. You've done over 500 TV appearances, a ton of which were on Johnny Carson and David Letterman. What was your favorite moment from your late night TV appearances that you can recall?
Well, there's so many favorite of 500 appearances is hosting David Letterman, guest hosting, and hosting late shows, hosting my own show in Chicago. There were so many exciting moments, but nothing could be more exciting to me than that very first Tonight Show. You know, I did 61 appearances on the Tonight Show, but that first Tonight Show, there's no describing what that was like in 1975, wherever you went in America. People say, what do you do for a living? You say, I'm a stand-up comedian. The next question out of their mouth was, oh yeah, have you ever been on Johnny Carson? And if you hadn't been on Johnny Carson, then in the eyes of America, you weren't a comedian. You might want to be one, but you weren't one now. And so the pressure was enormous. There's 28 million people watched that show.
Mm-hmm.
Freddie Prinze did one appearance. He got a sitcom the next day. You know, when I got that opportunity to finally go out there and get on that show, they bumped me 3 times in a row. I'd get there, be putting makeup, go to my dressing room, ready to go. They ran out of time. I came back next week, makeup, go to the dressing room, bring me back down to the green room, ran out of time. 3 weeks in a row. The 4th time I go there, I'm in makeup. And Fred DeCordova, the producer, Fred DeCordova said, he came in the green room, he said, I got bad news for you. And I said, what? He said, you're going on tonight. Now the pressure is enormous. They put you behind that curtain and it's ready to go out there. And this is it, pal. You ever hear that song called One Moment in Time? You know, just one moment where all of my dreams are a heartbeat away and the answers are all up to me. This is that moment. This is that moment that if it doesn't go well here, you know, I'm sorry, pal, it's back to Harvey, Illinois. Not only did all the talent coordinators, Vegas buyers, you know, all the sitcom people watch that show, but my mother had everybody back in Harvey, Illinois watching the show. So if I bomb tonight, I can't even go back home. So you're behind that curtain, and this is that moment.
Was it quicker than like, was it over before it began? You know what I mean?
No, because again, you walk, they come back out of commercial, and Johnny Carson says, we're back now. And I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight, because my next guest is making his first appearance on the Tonight Show, where you welcome Tom Dreesen. They open the curtain and you walk out. You can't see the audience. Bright lights hit you. There's a mark on the floor you hit. You hit that mark, and the people are applauding, and you do your first joke, and it got a laugh. And I did my second joke, and it got a laugh. Did my third joke, and Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon are laughing behind me. Got applause. Before the set was over, I got 8 applause. And then I finally finished, and this is that moment that is hard to describe. I said, you've been a wonderful audience, and show business is a tough life. This is my first appearance on the Tonight Show. So if you like me, just if you like me, and you're Protestant, say a prayer. If you're Catholic, light a candle. If you're Jewish, somebody in your family owns a nightclub. Tell them about me, will you please? They laugh. Yeah. They applaud. I take my bow. I go through the curtain, and the coordinator, Craig Tennis, come running around. He said, go back. Johnny wants you to go back. I said, go back and talk to Johnny. He said, no, don't go back and talk to, just go back. They open the curtain. I go back out for the second bow, and Johnny Carson gives you that little circle, you know, and the audience is still applauding. I walked through the curtain, and my whole life changed. I was on unemployment. I had a wife and 3 kids. My rent was $225 a month. I couldn't even make the rent money half the time. And my next day, CBS signed me to a development deal. They gave me a check for $10,000 and $1,850 a month for a year. That meant my groceries, my rent, everything was paid, the kids' shoes, school, all that. And I could focus on my career. So that moment, if you're asking me about a moment of all the hundreds of television shows I did, that moment was the most exciting, because the pressure was on. Yeah. This is that, like that song goes, all of my dreams are a heartbeat away, and the answers are all up to me. You know, this is that moment.
That's great. I love that. You developed a strong sense of your Catholic faith in God through having a pretty tough childhood, as we have gathered. Let me ask you this: how did that faith carry you through all those early days of struggle in Hollywood? And what would you tell young comics about letting God guide their careers?
Well, let me tell you, my God, the God that I pray to, you know, we all pray to. When I was first grade, going to Catholic school, my father was alcoholic. He was a docile guy. He was a good guy, but he wasn't a father. We had 8 kids, 4 boys and 4 girls. And he was never like a father to me. He never put his arm around me, never told me he loved me, never took me fishing, hunting, or any of those kind of things, sports, nothing like that. Good guy, but nonetheless. So when I get to first grade, the nuns were telling me and telling the class that we had a Father in heaven and that he sent his son here to tell us about this Father in heaven. And thus they taught us the prayer, Our Father who art in heaven. But as a little boy, 6 years old, I thought, I have a Father in heaven? Wow. And I can go to this Father and give him my fears and my doubts and my feelings and my hopes and my dreams. And that was taught to me. So from that 6-year-old boy, that's what I'd always ask the Father to help me. Now, throughout my life, that has helped me through my years in the service and all that. There were times I left God. I drinking and partying after I came out of the service and everything, but he never left me, and then I went back to him in the days of struggling out here in show business. My wife left me, took the 3 kids and said, that show business wasn't her dream, it was mine. I was going through a difficult time. They all came back, but at that time I was hitchhiking up and down Sunset Boulevard, begging to work for free at the Comedy Store. And one night I got rejected so many times that I went back and I was sleeping in an old Nash Rambler that was up on blocks. And it's a long story how that happened. The front seat came down and I was living in that car, washing up in a gas station. And I was 30 years old, a wife and 3 kids back in Chicago. And one night, after being rejected and thrown out of an agent's office for trying to be bold and getting some work, I went back to that car and I was either going to burst into tears or just totally give up. And I laid in that car and I thought, I can't get anybody to manage me. I can't get anybody to represent me. And I began to pray to God. I said, God, I want you to be my manager. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm praying to you now and I'm asking you, whatever happens tomorrow, I'll know that's where you want me to go. I want to be a stand-up comedian. I want to make my living as a stand-up comedian. But God, thy will be done. But I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to believe that you're managing my career. And whatever happens, I'll know it's because you put it in front of me. And I fell asleep and I felt like somebody took a big boulder off my chest. Within a week, Carl Reiner saw me at the Comedy Store and my whole life changed. He put me in a film. They gave me some money. That gave me enough money to do a show up in Canada. The people up in Canada paid my way into Chicago. I opened for Fats Domino at Mr. Kelly's. I got to talk my wife to come back with me. We got the 3 kids. We came out here. But again, that's what I would tell young comedians, that there is a higher power.
Yeah.
You can't do it all alone. And there's such a thing that at that moment, you've already heard that cliche, and it worked for me. Let go and let God.
Yeah.
Now, I want to tell you one other story that will relate to this. In September 1969, I went on stage with Tim Reed. We were America's first black and white comedy team. History shows we were the last. That was my first time on stage. And for 6 years, we stayed together. But the first night I worked with him in a club, there weren't any comedy clubs in those days. So we worked jazz clubs, nightclubs, and all black clubs in the North and the South. But the first night we went on stage, something I had written got a laugh. And it was like an epiphany, like one of those B movies where the dark clouds open up and the sun bursts through. My whole being went, oh, yeah, this is what I want to do. I was wandering aimlessly before that. But the thought that I could make a living making people laugh, I just knew that it's what I wanted to do. That night, I couldn't sleep. It was a Friday night. I couldn't sleep. I was just so excited. I got up early in the morning. I went to church, Ascension Church, where I had been an altar boy, where I sang in the choir. My mother sang in the choir. There was no service. It was a Saturday morning. I got on my knees and prayed. I said, God, now I know what I want. I want to be a stand-up comedian. Please, God, if you could let me make my living as a stand-up comedian, I'll do charities. I'm making all these promises. All my prayers have been answered. 50 years from that date, September 1969, September 2019, I went back to that church and I gave a sermon on the power of prayer to the congregation. And it's quite simple. Yeah. I said, I always like to use the KISS system, keep it simple, stupid. I said, how many of you out there were ever thinking of someone and you hadn't seen him in years, and you're walking down the street and you run into him and you say, oh my God, I was just thinking about you. And they said, you know what? I was thinking about you too. Or the phone rings, someone you haven't heard from a long time, you've been thinking about, the phone rings, and it's that person. And you say, you know, I was just thinking, they said, I was thinking about you too. I said, raise your hand. The whole congregation raised their hand. How many has that happened to? I said, if we human beings can transfer thought, and obviously we can, then how much thought can a supreme being transfer? A supreme being, you know. So that's, prayer is not psychic hocus pocus. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
You know, that a lot of sense, and this common sense, and it's worked. And that's what I tell young comedians. There is a God, and he does hear your prayers, you know. And anyhow, that's a long story.
No, I love it.
That's a great story. Yeah. So Tom, how important do you think clean comedy is today? And you know, isn't there more money in clean? Do you talk about that with other comics?
There certainly was in my day. You know, when I started out, show business was national television, was ABC, NBC, CBS. It was about this big. Today, television is vast, beyond television. So, you know, when I started out, you couldn't, if you went on the Tonight Show, you couldn't say go to hell. You couldn't say damn. You couldn't swear at all on any of those TV shows. So, you know, it was very important to get work, and singers would want a comedian like that to open for them because they had family audiences for the most part. All the singers I opened for, but also corporate America in those days were big paying gigs, and they would bring their clients and their superiors and their fellow workers to this corporate date, and they didn't want them insulted with filthy language and, you know, all that stuff. So it was big money in those days. Today, I'm not quite so sure, Carl. That's a good question, because today, I mean, I know there's a lot of clean comics that are doing churches around the country. I don't know how much big money is in that. I mean, there's a living at it. So clean comedy is important if that's what you want to do. But when cable came along, all of a sudden, some of the filthiest comics I've ever seen in my life, women say things today. I follow women sometimes when I'm trying out new material at the Comedy Store, at the Laugh Factory, or the Comedy Chateau, or any of those places. I'll follow a woman sometimes. Red Fox would have ran out of the room. So, but they make a lot of money. I mean, as filthy as they are, they get sitcoms and they get shows, you know. I followed a girl on Saturday Night Live a while back. I never heard material that gross in my life, and she's a regular on Saturday Night Live. So anyhow.
Wow.
So the answer to that question is I tell young comedians, if you're going to be a comedian, why don't you try to write your first hour clean? Just challenge yourself, because I think, Carl, I told you this story, but I was at the Laugh Factory one night, and I was going to try out some new material. This is about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and there were two young comics around the corner. And I didn't know they were there, and they didn't know I was there. And I was looking at my notes, and I heard one of the comedians say, you know, Tom Dreesen's here. So my ears perked up. And the other comedian said, yeah. He said, he's going to do a show tonight. You know, he said, he's old school. That's what he said. And the other kid said, what do you mean he's old school? He said, well, you know, he doesn't use the F word. And the other comedian said, he doesn't use the F word. What does he use for adjectives?
Oh my gosh.
I stuck my head around the corner and I said, adjectives. That's what I use for adjectives. But again, it's a whole different world today for comedy. And
yeah, let me ask you this. So, you know, so back in the day, and after hearing about your stories about like Johnny and, you know, people get a sitcom, back in the day, well, Carson made careers, but like, you know, about today, do you see a lot of that going on? Is there an equivalent of that today? Like, I don't see the careers being made. It's like, I see a lot of I mean, obviously all careers are made with the help of others. You can't just do it alone, but it just seems to be like maybe not as many or careers are being made in that way anymore. Like, how do you see careers being made today? Back in the day, you know, the difference between like Johnny calling someone over and they got a sitcom, as now it's what?
Well, you know, in those days, again, 28 million people watch a show, and that show could launch you. But today, it's a totally different. There was a stairway to stardom when I started out. As I said earlier, wherever you went, people say, what do you do for a living? I'm a stand-up comedian. Oh, yeah? Have you ever been on Johnny Carson? So we all knew Freddie Prinze did that one appearance, got a sitcom. All the comedians came from all over the country out here to the West Coast. to get on it, to try to get on at the Comedy Store and then get your way to the Tonight Show. But today it's social media. Now, I don't think any of the late night talk shows could launch your career. I mean, there's comedians that go on them, Kimmel and Fallon and Colbert, and I don't think that it gives them a great introduction, you know, and when they're going somewhere. But I don't launch your career. But Joe Rogan could. Joe Rogan has the kind of following that not only did 12 million people watch it, but another 100 million watch it in, you know, when they put it on the internet. So a lot of comedians get a lot of work. Incidentally, so could Howard Stern at one time. I don't know if he still can, but Howard Stern, comedians who go on that show. So that they might be able to launch it. But the point is the social media. Dane Cook, when MySpace first came out, he started filling Madison Square Garden from doing social media. Young comedians ask me all the time, how do you give me advice? I said, at your age, you know all about these things, you know, the social media stuff. That's where it's at. That's where getting on, you know, and by the way, I had to get an act together when I started. Tim Reed and I had a 30-minute act, you know, and then when I was doing the Tonight Show, I had to get a good tight 5 minutes. Today, you can put one joke on Instagram. And you know, a while back, I did 2 jokes at the Laugh Factory. I did a whole set, but I took 2 jokes out and put it on Instagram. And I can't tell you, it got 2.5 million views and something like 1,800 shares. So God knows how much that went. And there were 2 simple jokes that I had been doing for a long time. I don't know. The audience reacted so well. I put it on Instagram, got all kinds of followings from it. You know, that's where it's at. Social media. That's how you make it today, I believe.
Okay. That sounds reasonable. Let me see. So you like to give back, offering advice and big talk at events for other comedians, where you share your wisdom. What inspires you to give these talks to other comics and to pass that information down?
It's part of the prayer that I made in September 1969. God, if you let me make my living as a comedian, I'll give back. I promise I'll give back. I was making all those promises, and God answered my prayers. So I'm keeping my end. I've done a lot of charities. I don't like to talk about that, but because it's biblical in nature. You can find it in, if I had time, I'd find the missile. I found it. This is why you don't brag about doing charities. That it's biblical in nature. You don't stand out in front of the temple. I'll read it here.
Yeah.
Jesus said to his disciples, be on guard against performing religious acts for people to see. Otherwise, expect no recompense from your heavenly Father. When you give alms, for example, do not blow a horn before you in synagogues and streets like hypocrites looking for applause. You can be sure of this much: they are already repaid. In giving alms, you are letting your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Keep your deeds of mercy secret, and your Father who sees it in secret will repay you. Now, there was a book written called The Magnificent Obsession by Lloyd C. Douglas. Its predecessor was a book called Dr. Hudson's Secret Journal. And it was about the secret of success. And the secret of success is that whatever you pray and say, ask and you shall receive is what it is. You say, God, I want to be a plumber. I want to be an architect. I want to be a singer, a comedian. You have to believe with everything you in your heart and soul that's going to happen. Ask and you shall receive. From that moment on, you've made a deal with God. And he says, then look for my less fortunate children and help them quietly, and especially if they don't know. It's in the book. Within 30 days, if you see someone that needs help and you can help them without them knowing it, within 30 days, your master will reward you towards your endeavor. That's what this is about. And they made a movie about it, The Magnificent Obsession. Frank Sinatra believed that more than anybody in the world. He did so many things that you will never, ever know. He never talked about it, and he didn't want you to talk about it. He helped people. There were times where people would be a woman had children, 11 children. One had a brain tumor, and they lived like in a boxcar. And the child needed help, and someone delivered the money to them for the surgery, and the person delivering the money didn't know where it came from, because all of this I'm saying is part of giving back. That's why I want to motivate other comedians. When I do motivation talks, we talked earlier, I talk on 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. And for comedians, I do a special one called The Joy of Stand-Up Comedy and How to Get There. We have to keep giving back. This knowledge isn't mine. I learned it from others too. And so it's my responsibility to pass it on. Remember this: stay away from small people. Small people with these little, that would, when I say small people that will try to belittle your ambitions. Small people, successful people want you to become successful also. Small people will try to belittle your ambitions, but successful people will want you too to become successful. And all of that, again, it goes back to my belief in a higher power. My prayers are answered, so I know prayers are answered.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so Tom, do you write every day still, or did you when you were on the road more? And what is your process like? What inspires you as you whenever you do sit down to write material?
Well, kind of like that shirt you're wearing. I'll probably do a bit on that later on, Carl. But I'm being facetious. But I used to, when I was doing all the Tonight shows, you had to keep coming up with new material. I was doing Johnny Carson, Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, Midnight Special, Rock Concert,
Wow.
Soul Train, American Bandstand, Hollywood Squares. I was doing all these shows, and you had to want to be fresh on all these shows with fresher material. So I was in a constant state of writing. But today, what I do, if I'm on an airplane, and today you got the cell phone, but I still to this day never got on an airplane or go somewhere that I don't have a pen and like some 3x5 cards in my pocket, because somebody will say something and I'll go, ooh, I know that could or something will happen that wasn't funny, but I say, how that could have been funny if this would have happened. So then I write it down. I write notes to myself, and what I'll do, I'll compile a bunch of notes, and then one night I'll just sit down with all those notes and I'll write them. I'll get a 8x10 sheet pad, and I'll start writing them long-handed jokes, but I don't have a system anymore, like every Tuesday night. I would recommend that to other comedians. I've been doing it 55 years now. I do a 90-minute show that sometimes goes 2 hours. The show I do, The Man Who Made Sinatra Laugh, I've got a wealth of material, that I can go to in my brain, but I still want to keep fresh and come up with new material. And I'll give you a quick example why. When I was working at Harris one time and with, I think it was Sammy Davis Jr., at Caesars was George Burns. Now, I had done the Dean Martin roast with George Burns. He was 95 years old, and he was headlining at Caesars in Lake Tahoe. I finished my show one night. I went over to catch his show, and he didn't run out to the microphone at 95 years old. But when he got out there, he did a strong hour and 10 minutes. When he came off stage, I went to his dressing room. I walked in. He was looking at some 3x5 cards. He hadn't looking at some cards. I said, "Hey, George." He goes, "Hi, Tommy." Oh, he said, "I was working on some new material tonight." I said, "That's what I want to be. I want to be 95 years old working on new material." But I think it's important, Carl. It's a good question. I think it's important for you to structure yourself to write material. If you're a comedian today, and I tell young comedians all the time, if you don't know how to write material, you're not going to make it in the long run. You'll be limited. So if you don't know if you're not a natural comedy writer, go take courses on it. It's not rocket science. Comedy, if you're writing a joke, is basically comedy is 9/10 surprise. The audience laughs because they didn't think you were going to say that. So the setup line has to hide the punchline. The other rule is there are no victimless jokes. Who's the victim in the joke? Me, the society, the government, the airlines. My daughter's dating a punk rocker. Rodney Dangerfield. I get no respect. I get no respect. You know what I mean? Somebody's going to be wrong in this joke. When I was brand new, I once met a comedian named Mort Saul. I was in the business about 6 months, and he was a star. He was appearing at clubs all over. I snuck into the back of the club and to see if I could go to his dressing room. I snuck it, and they could have locked me up. I knocked on his dressing room door, thinking his manager would answer. I just wanted to ask Mort some questions. Mort Saul answered the door. There was no one in his dressing room. I said, I'm Tom Dreesen. I'm a new comedian. Could I talk to you? He said, yeah, come on in. He talked to me for almost 2 hours before his next show and gave me advice and everything. And I'll never forget that. He said to me, do you write your own material? I said, yes. He said, remember, they're wrong. I said, what? He said, remember, they're wrong. I said, who? He said, who are you writing about? They're wrong. The airlines, the government, the bus driver, maybe you're wrong, but somebody's got to be wrong in this job. It was simplistic, And by the way, and that also, I walked out of there that night on cloud 9. I'd been a comedian 4 or 5 months. This guy was a star, and he took time with me to give me advice and talk to me. I said, if I ever make it, I made a promise that night to God. I said, if I ever make it, God, let me remember this night so that I don't ever turn down any comedian that would like to have some advice. Thus, I'm on this show with Carl for the 55th time.
I can't help you, kid. You're incorrigible. Hey, quick question. So you said you had 3 kids. Did they ever want to be in show business, or they had no aspirations for it, or are they in show business? Or
no, my one daughter, my oldest girl, could sing, but they watched the dues that I paid, the dues that I paid. My other daughter, she worked with Alanis Morissette. She worked with Stevie Nicks. She was like a road manager sometimes, and that's how she met her husband. He's a sound man. He works for Clare Brothers now, but he was rated one of the top 5 sound men on Variety magazine. Bono and all them, they wanted him. David Foster raved about him. Michael Bublé, when I was opening for Michael Bublé, David Foster was producing Michael Bublé shows. And when I mentioned my son-in-law, I said, oh, he's the best sound guy in the business. We want him on every gig. But he left all that to work for the company because he's got my grandchildren. His wife and his kids were more important than the business,
Right.
Anyhow.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So do you still, like, you did a ton of acting on all sorts of great sitcoms, like WKRP in Cincinnati, and lots of other shows that have been popular over the decades. Do you still do any acting roles, or what is your favorite acting memory?
Well, I'm an actor. I studied acting in Chicago, and I studied acting out here in LA, and I enjoy stand-up comedy because when I'm in Vegas or in somewhere, it's 7:30. I think I better go down. You go and you walk down to your dressing room around 7:45. You start getting dressed. You do your show. You walk off and they hand you your money or whatever it is. Acting. You get there at 5 o'clock in the morning. Now you've been reading the script for 4 days and you've got the lines down. You get there at 5 o'clock in the morning and they shoot your scene at 6 that night, and you've gone over the routine over and over. It's tedious. I enjoy the acting. I don't enjoy the preparation and all. It's a pain in the butt, but I've done a lot of acting. Yeah. WKRP, doing that with Tim and I, the team had split up for years, and Tim became a big star on that show. And one night, as you know, Tim was the only black guy in an all-white radio station on WKRP. He was Venus Flytrap. And they wrote a script of a young white guy who was working for an all-black magazine going over to interview Venus Flytrap. And the Hugh Wilson and Tim said there's only one guy could play that role, my former comedy partner. And that was really a joy to be on a sitcom with Tim after all those years we struggled and all that. Now and to do a routine with him again was really a lot of fun. I won't forget that. But a couple things. Murder, She Wrote. I did a Baywatch one time where I really thought I was at my best in this scene. I at my acting best. But I did Murder, She Wrote. With good God,
Angela Lansbury.
Angela Lansbury, yeah. I did a great scene with her. I was a cab driver driving her to the racetrack. And she said to me, even though we had a director, she directed me. She said to me, this is what we want in the scene, Tommy. I'm trying to get away from you. I'm trying to get away from you to go into tide, but you're holding me, not physically, you're holding me with your conversation because you won't let up on what you're trying to say. I said, you got the right guy for this role. But yeah, that was fun working with her, this brilliant star, and the scene went over like great because she directed it properly. I knew exactly what she wanted. But The other, the movies, that I enjoy doing, Trouble with the Curve with Clint Eastwood, because he's a buddy of mine. Frank Sinatra introduced me to Clint 35 years ago, and we became fast friends, and we go to dinner and we hang out and we play golf. And I love the guy. But when he was shooting the movie Trouble with the Curve, he gave me a role in it to do a scene with him. And that was, of course, a lot of fun. And the other thing I'll tell you is Spaceballs. The reason why I bring that up, how I got that role, I just got divorced, and I'm dating this very pretty girl. She's taller than me. And a friend of mine, a football player named Tim Reitman, who was with the Chicago Bears, he fixed me up with her. And we hit it off. It was our first date, and we go to dinner, and I did a spot at the Improv that was down in Santa Monica. In those days, they had an Improv in Santa Monica, and there's a restaurant right across the street. We went in this packed restaurant, and the table wasn't ready. So I go to the bar, and I sit down, but she stands up, and she's so tall that Mel Brooks is in the restaurant, and he sees her. And so he wandered around the restaurant, and he wandered over by, and he's just wanting to see this pretty girl because she was gorgeous. And he sees me sitting there, and he goes, "Hey, Dreesen." I met Mel. I never did anything with him, but I met him. He said, "Hey, Dreesen, how you doing?" I said, "Oh, hi, Mel." I said, "Mel, this is my girlfriend, Trish." It was my first date. So he's saying, "Oh," and he's talking. He said, "Hey, Dreesen." This was a Friday night. He said, "What are you doing Monday?" I said, "What do you want me to do Monday?" He said, "Well," he said, I'm doing this movie. I said, "I'll do it." He said, "Wait a minute. I didn't even tell you about it." I said, "I don't care. I'll sweep the floor. I'll wash the windows to be with Mel Brooks. Are you kidding me?" "Yeah. What do you want me to do?" He said, "Well, it's a small role and only a couple of things that you're going to be doing." And I said, "Fine." And I showed up. I ended up shooting 2 days on Spaceballs. Had the greatest time hanging out with Mel and Carl Reiner and all the writers that were there, and a guy named Ronnie Graham, who was a hysterical writer. But that was another, when people say, "I read for this part and I was prepared for it," I was sitting in a bar with a pretty girl,
Oh, yeah. I wish more Hollywood stories were like that nowadays, it seems like.
Which, by the way, Mel Brooks paid me $8,000 for that for 2 days. And that movie has run. I will go to the mailbox today and there'll be a check in there for 28 cents or something for Spaceballs. That movie has run more than anything that I've ever done in my life, over and over and over overseas. And I don't know how much I've made over the years,
Yeah.
just on and on and on.
Oh, that's awesome. So let me ask you this. So you told us you toured opening for Frank Sinatra worldwide for a few decades there. What do you think made your connection between you and Frank so special?
Well, first of all, let me clear up something, correct you on something. I didn't open for Frank Sinatra. He closed for me. By the way, people would say, "You wouldn't say that if he was alive." I used to say in front of him, people would come up, we'd be talking somewhere. They'd say, how long have you been opening for Frank? And I'd say, "I like to think that Frank closed for me." And Frank would say, "Yeah, I closed for him. I closed for him." He'd make it. He had a good sense of humor, But I think a couple of things that made it special. When I went to go to work with Frank Sinatra, I thought I was only going to do 1 week. That's all. I was going to do a week with him, and then I was going to try to get my picture taken with it and hang it in every bar back in Chicago, everything. But I think one of the things we connected on, he was an incredible professional. The show was important. You want to party, you want to joke, you want to do all those things, that's fine. Not Showtime. Showtime, you prepare. The show was very important to him. I'll digress and get back to what I'm getting at here. But he at one time said to him, "Why do we wear tuxedos?" He said, "Tommy, if we did a show for the King and the Queen, would we wear a tuxedo?" I said, "Yeah, sure." He said, "Well, that garage mechanic in Detroit and his waitress wife, who work all year long before 2 tickets to our show, they're just as much royalty as the King and the Queen. And we perform for them a command performance, just like we do the King and the Queen." I said, "Oh, so the show was important." But for me, it was too. I prepared. And so on that level, he knew I came ready. By the time I met Frank, I had been doing I toured with Sammy Davis for years. I toured with Smokey Robinson. I toured with Mac Davis, Natalie Cole, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Frankie Avalon, James Darren. I performed with a lot of singers. And so I was ready when but I prepared for the show and I took it serious. And if he said, "Tommy, do 22 minutes, I did 22 minutes. If he said, "Tommy, do 18 minutes, I did 8. If he said, "Do 30 minutes, I could prepare and sometimes he changed his mind as I'm going up to the stage. I got it in my head what I'm going to do, and he changed minds. But I approached the stage with a lot of professionalism, and so did he. So that on that level we hit. Then, you know, when I first toured with him, he was the boss of this magnificent tour, 20,000 seat arenas, 40,000 in Hawaii, all around the world, you know. And so he was the boss. But then later he became like a friend. Tommy, what are you doing? Let's go, you know, go get a drink, or let's go have something to eat. We became like friends, and toward the end of his life, he was like a father to me, you know. And so, and also, I'm Irish Italian. He half Sicilian. He's half Sicilian. I had 3 children, girl, boy, girl. He had 3 children, girl, boy, girl. You know, I grew up in saloons, shining shoes in taverns, setting pins in bowling alleys. But I grew up in all the saloons in my neighborhood. And Frank Sinatra's mother and father had a saloon in Hoboken. He would sing to the sailors every day, a little Nickelodeon. They'd put a nickel in, give him a nickel, and he'd sing. I was a neighborhood guy, and so was he. A guy from the New York Times once said to Frank Sinatra, "Why do you?" We were in a restaurant in Chicago, in New York, called Patsy's, and this New York Times columnist, I knew him, I'd met him, and he was walking by, and I'm sitting with Frank, and so he stopped and he said to Frank, "I don't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Sinatra, but let me ask you a question. Why do you keep Tom Dreesen with you all these years?" He said, "You mean besides the fact that he's funny?" He said, "Yeah." Frank said, "Well, if I'm a saloon singer," and I am, he said, "then Tommy is a saloon comedian. By that, I mean, we're just a couple of neighborhood guys." And I never forgot that. That meant more to me, because that's what we were. When I was in a car with him alone at night, driving in the desert, staying at his home 6 times a year, he never went to bed till the sun came up. So he'd come and get me out of my bungalow. He had all these bungalows on the outer perimeter of his compound. They were called New York, New York, Strangers in the Night, Tender Trap, My Way, named after his songs. He'd come and get me. We'd go for a ride. I'd drive around the desert. In that car at night, all of a sudden, there'd be moments where he wasn't the great Frank Sinatra, the singer, and I wasn't this comedian, Tom Dreesen. We were 2 guys from the neighborhood, and we'd talk about growing up in the neighborhood and talk about going to church. You know, I'd go to mass with them on Sunday, St. Francis of Assisi, down in the desert, and that's exact replica of the church in Assisi, and that's the exact replica that Frank Sinatra, through a lot of charities, raised money to build that church, and we'd go to church together too.
Back in the day, they didn't have like NDA agreements, right? Like you just, like, I'm sure there's stuff that, you know, from the block, we don't talk on certain things. You know what I mean? Like, so did you went to probably some of those parties and stuff too? I'm not saying anything negative or that anything bad went down, but I'm just saying, like, there's certain things we don't talk about. You know what I'm saying?
Well, by the way, and I know you're talking about, like, it's funny. I could give a talk about Frank Sinatra for 1 hour and 45 minutes about his incredible acting career, where he won the Academy Award, never studied acting. Sitting around with him and 4 actors one night, Gregory Peck, Kirk Douglas, Clint Eastwood, Robert Wagner, Jack Lemmon. All the women had gone to bed. They were talking about acting and stuff. And I was curious of who he studied with, because they were showing such reverence to Frank, all these actors. And I said, "Frank, did you ever study acting?" And Gregory Peck grabbed my arm. He said, "Acting lessons would have ruined him." He said, "This was a diamond in the rough you didn't fool with, Tommy." You know, but of all those things, I'd give a talk about Frank for 1 hour and a half. You gave Frank a script, a song. To him, it was a script. What did the writer feel the night the writer took pen in hand? He would immerse himself in that lyric and become that lonely guy in a bar whose woman left him, and he's never going to find love again. And you felt that. You felt that. And you felt the joy of his songs. You know, "Come Fly With Me." You know, he was the best at that. I could talk about that in his acting and all his benevolence. And at the end, I'd say, "Are there any questions?" And the very first question was, "Frank Sinatra in the Mafia?"
Oh my God.
So I went a long way to say you were hinting around, you know, but did he know those guys? Of course he knew those guys. I mean, we knew those guys. When I set out in show business in 1977, first of all, I started out in 1969. They owned all the nightclubs. They owned the bars. They owned the places where you were going to work. When I got to Vegas finally, years later with Sammy Davis, touring with Sammy, they owned how many places they own in Vegas? The Tropicana, the Stardust, and all these hotels. They were connected to them. So you worked for them, and you got your picture taken with them. They, you know, and all that stuff. So yes, he knew those guys, but there was a tacit agreement that like the cliche about Vegas, what you see here stays here.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
another thing that he and I were real close, because he knew that, one night in the car, I'll tell you, I think I may have told Carl this story, but one night in a car, we were riding around and he opened up and he told me something really personal. And then after he told me, he said, I should have never told you that. I said, well, it won't go any further than this car. He said, I know. He said, but I shouldn't have told you that. And I said, well, it's not like we're strangers, we're friends, and I don't know what made me do it. I was driving almost into the compound where he lived. And I said, we're not like we're strangers, we're friends. And I said, strangers in the night, exchanging glances. He said, for God's sake, if you're going to sing that song, get in key. So he goes, strangers in the night. I said, exchanging glances. I said, wandering in the night. What were the chance? And we were doing this song back and forth as we pulled into the compound. And when we parked the car, he'd always sock me in the jaw. He said, good night, Tommy. Good night, Tommy. But I was going back to my bungalow and I was thinking, if I went back to my neighborhood and I told all the guys, I was just riding around with Frank and we were singing Strangers in the Night, they'd say, get the heck out of here with that crap. But it happened. And it's a moment I'll never forget.
That's awesome. I love that story. All right, Carl, why don't you wrap it up and give Tom here the final question that we've written.
Well, we were wondering, where do you see yourself in 10 years, Tom?
Probably doing this show. Well, I always tell everybody I'm going to be doing stand-up till I'm 100 years old. So the story I told you about George Burns, that's where I see me. I see me going on stage, making people laugh. It's the greatest profession on the planet. It's that I found stand-up comedy that I can make people laugh. I wrote a poem many years ago called, I'm not going to do it for you, but it's called The Sound of Laughter. And the opening lines were, as far back as I can remember, or shortly thereafter, I love to hear the sound of laughter. And so that's what I see. I see myself keeping making people laugh, keep coming up with new material, writing fresh material, and just enjoying this great gift that God gave me, this opportunity to make his children laugh. And saying that, I don't mean to interrupt, but when I'm saying that laughter is healing, it's not a theory anymore. Laughter is healing. If you're watching a comedian work, you're not thinking of your problems. The brain can't function two thoughts at the same time. So laughter is healing. So if you're watching a comedian laugh or listen to a comedy record or watch a comedian work and you're laughing, you're not thinking of your problems. But because of a man named Norman Cousins, UCLA did research and found out that when the human body laughs, you have a hearty laugh, endorphins are released from the brain into the bloodstream. And actual endorphins. So after a hearty laugh, you go, oh, and this sense of well-being comes over you, tears come in, you have a sense of well-being. Your body's gone to an actual chemical change. So laughter is not only psychologically a deterrent, it's physiologically therapeutic. So therefore, comedians are physicians of the soul. My fellow doctors, as I talk to you. So that's why what I want to be doing. I want to continue doing that.
It's really funny, isn't it? It's a great profession because, I mean, unless something goes wrong with the mind, but you can do this gig as long as you can walk out on stage and talk into that microphone. You can do this till the day we go to the next world.
Yeah,
that's what the beauty of it is, right?
Hey, Bob Hope lived to be 100. George Burns lived to be 100. When George Burns was 95 years old, he was offered a 5-year contract at Caesar's Palace, and he turned it down. He said because he didn't know if Caesars would be around in 5 years.
Well, that's great, Tom. Thanks for taking the time to tell us all about your amazing life and share such wisdom. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you very much. And the best is yet to come. The last song Frank Sinatra ever sang on stage for Trivia Buff was The Best Is Yet to Come. And so when he says, what do you do next? I said, well, that's what I did, but now the best is yet to come.
And where can people find you? What's your website or social?
TomDreesen.com, DREESEN, TomDreesen.com. And it tells you all about what I've done, where I'm going, and what I hope to do, and places I'm working at. And that's it.
All right.
Great.
Thanks a lot, Tom. We're lucky to have you. We really appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate it. And my best to both of you. And do me a favor when you edit this down, and I'm sure you'll edit it down to about 3 minutes. Send it to me, will you? Carl, you can get a hold of me.
Yeah. Sure.
Sure.
Hey, buddy.
All right.
Thanks.
I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
See you,
Bye-bye.
Tom.
Okay, bye.
CatholicLaughter.com brings live stand-up comedy shows to your church, fundraiser, or event. For more information or to inquire, go to CatholicLaughter.com and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.